Hey everybody, welcome to the Purpose People podcast. I've got Dean from Britannic Place, so welcome to the sofa.
Thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
So we're going to talk a little bit about like joining a company and working your way up. So often when we talk about purpose, it's entrepreneurship. You're starting something from scratch, and we've had a couple of podcasts more recently talking about acquiring businesses and growing them that way. Your journey is you're living life on purpose, but you're working for someone else, which is not wrong at all. So I always use that thing of Jurgen Klopp, football manager. He's doing his football job, but ultimately he still works for someone else, but he's living life on purpose. So tell us your position and your role within the company, and then we can explore how you got there and the journey that you've been on. Go for it. So
I am a chartered financial planner.
Yep.
I've been with Britannic Place for 10 years now, or coming up to 10 years. So I have a number of clients. I look after probably at the moment coming up to 50 clients.
Wow.
Gradually building up a client bank of my own. And I've kind of come a long way through the business, and we'll explore that in more detail a bit later on. But yeah, started from arguably kind of the bottom, like not knowing anything.
Yeah.
And then gradually been taken through exams and then qualified a good number of years ago, but actually started taking on my own clients 2 years ago. So yeah, quite a big step up.
Yeah, definitely. So like when you were at school, then was it, everyone dreams to be somebody or something. Was that on your radar? Is it something you fell into?
Yeah, it's the typical financial planner's response in that I fell into it completely. So I was at university, studied sport and exercise science, which is actually similar to one of your previous attendees, and realised quite quickly that wasn't what I wanted to go into. But I looked at options in terms of conversion courses, and it was just adding another year, more expense. So I thought, do you know what, I'm just going to get the degree, and then I'll start to look at what I actually want to do. So left university, got a job at a local NFU Mutual, based out of Stratford-upon-Avon, worked in their pensions department, was there for a couple of years and actually realised this is quite interesting. I quite enjoy it. It kind of suits me because I've got quite an analytical background, quite sciencey, so kind of facts and figures is quite good for me. And then got approached by Steve at Britannic Place to come and work for him, and haven't looked back.
And obviously Steve's been on the podcast.
He certainly has. Yeah. He's got a better story than I have.
No, but the point is, it's like everyone starts from somewhere, and for me, it's like you're not an isolated case where you've gone and studied a degree and you completed it, but you end up doing something completely different.
I think it's really common, isn't it? It's kind of a lot of my peers that I went to school with and went to university with. None of them have gone into. They've just kind of got the degree, and often that's enough because it just shows that you can study off your own back and you can apply yourself when you need to, when there's kind of no restrictions like you have in school, and then you go and forge your own path.
I mean, I'm quite a big believer. I think we need to be asking those questions a lot earlier of school children and stuff like that. In terms of finding your route, and I think there are certain careers for university that absolutely you're not going to be a brain surgeon if you're not going to go to university.
Completely
right?
agree.
You're not going to make it up as you go along.
Yeah.
Just experiment on people.
See what happens.
It's not going to work, right? So you do need to go to university. But likewise, there are a lot of university courses that are just there for education's sake, but don't really provide a brilliant way in. I mean, I remember a whole load of people that I knew studied game design, and game design is really hard to get in.
Yeah.
And there was about a group of about 4 or 5 game designers, and they couldn't get the job that they needed to get into that industry. So they began to diversify. And I think one girl, we had her in my creative agency for about 6 months. She sort of like retrained herself and that, and then she went and joined another company after us, and she became creative director within about a year and a bit because she understood the principles.
Yeah.
And I got a feeling they even then started moving into game design. So it can work, and I think for me, it's like that journey of studying and that discipline of studying is not lost, right? So
no.
So even though you've gone into a different career, you still had to study.
Yeah, and I think kind of when I look back, and we've got a couple of apprentices at work, and I've had conversations with them, and they've decided not to go to university, and they've gone straight from one of them kind of came in from GCSEs. One of them was starting to do A levels and came away, and they said, "Oh, I felt like I had to do uni, but then I had the option of work experience."
Yeah.
So I didn't really feel like I had that option when I was at school. So I'm 32 years old. Kind of finished school like nearly 15 years ago, but apprenticeships wasn't really a thing when I was leaving. It was all kind of for the trades, and that's fine, but certainly not to get into kind of my career. So I felt like I had to go to university to be able to get a better job, but it's not the case.
It's not. And I think that, certainly I remember I was at college and I was doing, I did national diploma and I did a higher national diploma. In fact, I was on the actual board or panel that got the college to get that ratified. So they did a national diploma, then they did a HNC, which they were trying to turn into HND, and then we managed to get the HND. And then what that meant is then I could do another year and get a degree. And so when I went to the different universities to go and get, there's two, I think one was Cardiff, one I think was Bournemouth. Bournemouth's quite famous as a graphic designers type media world. And they both said to me, don't get into any more debt. Just see if you can get a job off your portfolio. It's strong enough, you should get a job. First interview, got a job, never looked back.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow. But the reason why I went HND route rather than degree, because back in that time, a lot of the sort of like design communication courses were very heavily arty. So it's how to build a paper mache tree, and not necessarily how to work a Mac or a computer. Yeah. Whereas where we were, it was like they had one of the best Mac provisions in the UK at the time. They had like a whole floor dedicated with Apple Macs and all the systems. And it's just now known as the City of Bristol College, but it was originally called Brunel College. And so I plumped for that. And one of the reasons why I got hired first is I knew how to operate a computer. So that little bit of foresight. And also when I left school, I did a what do they call it? I think it's called a first diploma, which I didn't need, but I did it for the work experience. So I did a year's worth of study and work experience, knowing that the work experience would accelerate my way of getting a job.
Yeah.
And so when I left, it was like, yes, your portfolio is good, but because you can use a computer and you got work experience, it was like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And so that was brilliant.
And it's that experience that's so difficult to get hold of when you're first starting out, isn't it? But like taking a bit of initiative, basically. And so we've had a couple of work experience people come in to see us and spend some time with us. And actually kind of, it looks quite good when you can tell people, oh yeah, I went to work for so-and-so for 2 weeks or whatever it was. And I think that's what kind of looking back, if I'd have had a kind of a bit more guidance, I'd have been maybe trying different careers and saying like, oh, actually throughout the summer, why don't I do some work experience? Yeah. Because I never did that. And then I was just kind of confronted with decisions and I was like, oh, what do I do?
Well, I was quite fortunate because my parents had a friend where they knew someone that was slightly further down the journey than me. And I remember him distinctly come round and they sat in my house and he said, just ask him any questions. I said, well, how's it going? And he said, I'm struggling to find a job. I'm like one of the best students they've got. I can't get a job. And he said, look, I'm telling you now, if you get work experience, you'll get a job. At the end of it, he said, I'm now having to fight to get my work experience. So I feel like I'm a year behind to try and get into the industry. But he said, if you get that first, you'll fly. So I just took that advice on.
Yeah.
And I went down that route. And as you said, I mean, one of my best friends growing up, he ended up going to work as a shelf stacker, who eventually became a buyer. So that was another career, another journey, but not what he trained in, because he found it so hard to be able to get into the industry. So I think someone around you having that little bit of extra insight helped me get to where I needed to get to. And like you said, the opportunity to do an apprentice now is absolutely a viable option. Yeah, you get the best of both worlds. You can get a degree now on that sort of scheme. Which is incredible. Yeah, and
I think when you speak to I'm going to careers fair this week at one of the local schools, and last year when I was there were all the kind of the children that came to see me. They were like, oh, what degree do you need to do to come and become a financial planner? And I just say, you don't need to. But actually I think sometimes that they reflect on that as in, oh, that's not a proper career. But actually it is. Like, so I've got a degree. I've taken 15 exams since I've taken my degree, all when I was working full time. And like, people don't realize how difficult that is, but how much further that gets you on in your career. That's how, so I've got a qualification. So the base qualification you need in the UK to be an advisor is level 4, it's called. It's 6 exams, it's quite straightforward.
Yeah.
But I've taken another 7 to get to the level 6 qualification, which is kind of one of the top level qualifications you can get in the UK. So like, it's not a cop out to not go to university.
No.
Actually, you can be years further down the line by taking on an apprenticeship, but you can work both ways. It's
exactly, and I think that, and for me, it's understanding that you've learned the principles of studying, which has obviously set you up to go and do what you're doing. But I think it's that apprenticeships now are, for me, a very viable option. And I remember going to Apple actually, and Apple were like exploring the creative apprenticeships, which I think they're up and running now, but they took an age to get up and running in Bristol. And what happened is they were saying, we've always invested in young people as a brand. And the reason why we've invested in young people, because we are trying to anticipate what the young people are going to be using in 5 years' time.
Yeah.
And they said they're regularly employing 14 and 15-year-olds, like to show them, come up with ideas, that sort of stuff. And they cited in the presentation that they did to us about the iPod, where they literally went to the kids and said, wouldn't it be amazing if we get your entire record collection on a stick about that big? And they're like, wow, can you do that? Yeah, that'd be amazing. That'd be awesome. And then obviously then it grew, which is now merged into a phone.
Yeah.
So, and then obviously at the back of that, you got Spotify and Apple Music and things like that. But it was the way of saying, well, physical media can change to digital media. That means you can carry your entire music collection with you wherever you go.
Yeah. Which is unbelievable, isn't it?
Which is unbelievable, yeah. And that was the big shift. But what they were saying is that when you're in that like creative apprenticeship, you've got people getting real work experience, but also the principles and the knowledge and the thought process is that you'll spend years trying to figure out if someone goes, no, it's like this.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, the apprenticeship stuff, I'm a big advocate of. I think it's a good way of getting into a career and growing. So your journey specifically then, you go and work from Steve, probably fairly corporate-y environment, right?
It was,
It was. So now more of an SME type of environment.
Very much so. So when I joined, so I went from a firm. Well, we had a big open plan office. It was split into, it was open plan, but it was split into 4 quadrants, and my quadrant had probably 150 people in. Yeah. And you could be working with any number of the different teams in the other areas. Yeah. And then I went to a business that had 3 people in, which is obviously quite interesting. It's quite a big change. Yeah. But I think it always depends on the kind of person you are. And I've always thought that a smaller company suits me. Yeah. Because I think that I get lost quite easily. Yeah. In a bigger environment, there's always louder people, and there's always somebody that's more intelligent than you, or I think other people get noticed more easily. Yeah. But it takes me time to get noticed, and I think a smaller company gives you that opportunity because you get to do loads of things that you don't get to do working for a bigger company. You get way more responsibility so much earlier. Yeah. Which has had a dramatic impact on my career. If I'd have stayed where I was, I would never be kind of where I am now.
Which is an interesting point because, like, I think some people will go work for a large company, they've got everything all in control and it's all done. But you find that, I did a lot of freelancing in financial institutions, funnily enough. And it's a funny place. It's like everything takes a lot longer.
Really does.
Just to be nimble enough to go left or right or adapt. There's so many stakeholders involved. It takes forever to turn that ship. Yeah. I think they were just embracing, I'm showing my age now, but they were just embracing the web and implementing the graphic design 2D stuff onto the online environment. And there was so many it's too restrictive or how it might work. And then you had the brand Guardian that had to sign off what they were doing online to offline. Whereas like within a smaller company, you just get on and do it. Yeah. Build it, put it live and then
it's done. Well, so kind of one example, and this sounds like I'm really doing NFU Mutual down. It's a fantastic company and they're brilliant to work for. But I think they were still using Windows 98. And there was a huge IT project to get them onto like Windows XP. Yeah. And at the time, it was as I was leaving, I was like, God, that's like 10 years behind.
Yeah.
And actually, a few years later, and one of my friends actually works in IT there, one of my best mates, and he was like, it still isn't done.
Wow.
I was like, what? And that's the kind of pace of change that they have, because it has to go through so many levels.
That's it.
Whereas now, like working in a smaller company, if we make a decision, we can make a decision and do it there and then.
Yeah.
Which is nice, but also comes with a bit of risk, maybe.
Yeah, and I think that's it, isn't it? But I think what you're suggesting is that if you go and work for a smaller organisation, you have the ability to make more impact quicker.
Definitely, without question. Yeah.
And I think that's it. When you're working in a smaller organisation, is that if you're away for a day, that's also going to have a bit of an impact on the company, right? Because it's like a huge percentage of the workforce isn't there. But then, as you've rightly pointed out, you learn so much more, I feel, because you're in it and you're around it and stuff like that. And I guess the relationships are going to be stronger and tighter as a result.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think the relationships would, obviously I was a bit further removed from the relationships with clients when I was at NFU. Like, I had no conversations other than on the phone if they specifically called. But we were, like, nowadays, they're almost like personal friends.
Yeah.
You get to know them, you work together, so you see each other a few times a year. You get to know everything about them, about their family, about their finances. You know about their health. You know more about them than kind of their GP does. So, and that's the beauty of working for a small firm, is that you get to know it's a smaller number of people that you have to know, so you can know more about them. And that's what I really enjoy, and that's why it kind of suits me, because I get to know them over a period of time and kind of build my own confidence with those people. And because I think when you're just dipping in and out, it's quite hard. Like, I'm a bit of an introvert, and I think when I meet somebody for the first time, I'm almost a bit reserved.
Yeah, of course.
But kind of over time, you can, as your relationship grows, when you're working with them on an ongoing basis, you become more yourself, don't you?
Yeah, of course. And I think for you, like in your world, what I find quite interesting is that the age that you are, it's not common for people to stay in one place for a while.
No, it's not.
Like I was talking to someone in recruitment the other day, and they said it's the average now is about 18 months. And I'm like, how can you grow like 18 months and then come out and 18? It's like taking yourself out of the plant pot and every couple of weeks. It's not going to grow.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it's like, contrary to the advice of other people, I'd say, well, at least you need to be there at least 5 years.
Yeah, completely agree. Agree.
Rather than uprooting yourself every three years. And people go, oh, we like to see loads of experience. And I go, well, I sit on the side of, with my age now, where you would be the decision maker and hiring people. And if I saw someone changing every 18 months, I know that's going to be me as well. So why would I take you on?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You're not willing
agree.
to build. And I think for you, like, for someone being in the business for 5 years, you leave a decent amount of impact, and I look at it as a football manager. You if you're there for 18 months, you probably haven't done too much. You might get fortunate, win an odd trophy, but there's nothing sustainable. If you're there 5 years and you're given the time to build 5 years, you could build for the next 10.
And if you're there for 10 years, you get a testimonial when you leave, and it's like you become a fan favorite, don't you? And I think that's the thing with what so a lot of people say to me, oh, you've been really loyal, because it's quite unusual for somebody of your age, as you said, to stay in one place for that long. But actually, loyalty is a two-way street, and so Steve's been very loyal to me as well. And actually, it's kind of it's a relationship that we're kind of building something together, rather than kind of, he's making all the decisions. Actually, it's a collaborative approach,
which is great.
Which is what I need. It's what I want. But then I look at I'm a twin, and so I've got a twin. Yeah, I've got a twin sister.
Okay,
and she's the other end of the spectrum, really. That she has moved around quite a lot more than I have. Yeah, and she's still doing really well for herself. Like, she's doing brilliantly for herself. But it's quite interesting that we've both had very different work experiences. Yeah. I've had 2 firms that I've worked for. She's had probably 10. Yeah. And it's so weird, isn't it? We've had the same upbringing, it's just kind of what she felt like she needed to do, and what the social norm was for people of our age. Yeah. Just hopping around.
Yeah, and I think that's been the thing for me, is that I see a lot of that hopping around, and I think eventually it hurts you in the end, because then employers looking at it and go, well, I'm not really going to be a step on your ladder type thing. And if someone's signing me up for 5 years, at least you know you can build something sustainable, and maybe in year 4 then look to hand over, so you can leave the business in a much better position than when you found it. So, you know, in terms of the sort of like the clients that you work for and how you help, well, obviously it's financial advice, but, you know, what's the sort of like the biggest impact? Obviously you can't name names, but what's the biggest impact you've had, you know, to people's lives since planning their wealth?
So one of the examples that I've used, and so we've had I put together an award entry recently, and one of the examples that I use, and it's kind of one of our lowest value clients, and I've basically kind of helped him. So he was diagnosed with Parkinson's, and he like really struggles to kind of deal with anything kind of finance related. He was unable to work, and I actually kind of went into his he had like a work tribunal kind of thing to get him signed off officially. And because he was really struggling, I did that for him. And that, I think it's quite unusual to do that, and I'm not sure I should have done it, but it made a real difference to him, because otherwise it kept getting pushed back. Yeah. And he was never being out, like they were never able to sign him off, and he had to be signed off to then get his pension. And he was eligible for an ill health early retirement, so he gets an enhanced pension basically.
Right.
But he could never get it until he had that meeting.
Wow.
So I just said, right, okay, I'll do it for you, and then I'll deal with all the paperwork afterwards, and dealt with the HR department of his employer. And yeah, so it doesn't, I think quite often in our industry, you look for like the big ticket items, and I look after so many millions or X, Y, Z, and actually it's kind of just having a real impact on people that really need it that makes a big difference to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where, you know, you're using wealth management and finances, and you're making an impact on people's lives. Yeah. And I think, but the good thing in that is if you look after the smaller people, you're also going to get the big ones anyway, just by definition. Yeah. In terms
and it's just doing the right thing by people, and we all the work. So it was countless hours of work, and we didn't charge for it, but hopefully it comes back around, and it might not be with him, but it might be with somebody else, or he might tell somebody about the work we've done, and sometimes you just have to do a bit of good, don't you? And actually it's really rewarding. When the kind of statement came through to say that it had all been finalised, I was like, wow, like I've actually made a real difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So from your perspective then, you know, in terms of investments and stuff like that, I mean, when do you think's an ideal time to start investing?
As early as possible. As soon as you have so what we always say is you have to have a reasonable emergency fund. So obviously, like when you're 20, you've got kind of limited responsibilities. So you can probably just get away with investing then, and starting to pay into a pension. But when you're a little bit older, you've got to have a reasonable emergency fund. So if your boiler breaks down or if your car breaks down, you can quickly deal with it. So we say 3 to 6 months of expenditure kind of in the bank, in cash, readily available, so you can just spend it if you need to. Yeah. Anything other than that, anything beyond that, as long as you're comfortable to, you can invest. And actually, if you want to, it depends what you're working towards, but if you want to invest to retire a bit earlier, as early as possible.
Yeah, I remember a friend of mine, he's in wealth management, and he met a lady that we'd known in entrepreneur circles for quite a while, and she'd never had a meeting like that. And she'd been putting money away and whatever else. And he literally sat there and said, you know, you could retire now. And she's like, what? And he said, look. And within 2 weeks, she'd retired. Yeah. From going like to every networking event available, being quite present in the networking group that we were at, she made the decision, you know what? If that's an option, I'm going to take it. And then she ended up traveling and doing all the other things that she wanted to, but she had no clue up until she actually met someone that could go, look, well, this is what it looks like. You've been doing all the right things, but she almost needed someone to give her permission to say, go for it.
Do it, yeah. So they're some of the most powerful kind of conversations that we've had. So one client springs to mind. It's exactly the same situation. It wasn't my client, actually. It was fairly early on in my career. And I remember him kind of really being stressed, and his wife, they were in the meeting and they were like, please tell us we can retire. Like he was starting to kind of suffer a bit of kind of ill health as a result of being so stressed by his job. He had a really senior position in a big company, and we told him he could retire, and kind of he like almost broke down. Like it was, and you were just like, what a different, like, surely you knew, you look at what you had.
Yeah.
Surely you must have known that you were okay.
But I think you get
you don't.
No, you don't. I think you get into just that one more thing, one more holiday.
I'll just do one more year, or I just do another couple of years and pay for the big holidays, or I just want to see my kids through university, or whatever it is. And actually, sometimes you need somebody to have an independent view, and just look at it and crunch the numbers and just be like, actually, you're okay.
You're doing all right.
Yeah, you're doing really well for yourself. Like, in fact, spend more. Go and enjoy your life. Like, what are all the things you want to do in your life? And the amount of conversations you have where clients have wanted to do something and they've never done it, they've never gone and done it because they're just worried, oh, have I got enough, or does it mean that I'm gonna run out of money in my retirement? And you're just like, no, you go and do it. Like, if that's really what you want to do, go and do it.
Yeah.
Go and do it. Live your life.
Yeah.
Who knows what's going to happen?
Well, that's the thing, right? Because one of the things that I, like talking to different people is that they put their life on hold for retirement.
Yeah.
And then they get to their retirement and then they find themselves not to be in the greatest of health. And I was thinking, you know what? Yes, enjoy your life now. Take that holiday now. Go and do that. Yes, you've got to pot away for tomorrow. But the point is, if you want to live in a big house, you don't necessarily have to go and buy that big house. You could rent that big house. And if you did it for 10 years, your kids are all going to grow up anyway.
Yeah.
So, you often find like the investment curve is this. You buy your first house, it's maybe a 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom house. Then you have kids and then you want to like live somewhere much bigger, but you can't because your wages don't determine you've been able to do that because you're trying to buy it. And then someone I spoke to said, well, why don't you just do it now? Why don't you just rent? And you're like, oh, is that a wise thing to do? Well, if you're invested in other areas other than property, that might be a wise thing to do, but you give your kids the experience like now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you end up with a big house and all your kids are left home.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
where you could have rented, and it does seem a false economy, but then you're giving them memories or whatever. But you could invest in other things that could bring the money back.
Well, and so the UK has got a real anchoring over property, and we're desperate to buy, and we're so unusual in Europe. When you go to mainland Europe, they rent.
Yeah.
And they maybe have a family home that is passed down through the generations outside of the city, but they work in the city, they rent an apartment or rent a house or whatever it is, and they go to their house, their family home at the weekend that they own, and it's been passed down from kind of father to son to daughter. And that's the norm in mainland Europe. We're the unusual ones, but everybody's so obsessed with buying property.
I know. It's like
because it's expected.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I heard about them in Germany, they got a thing called 100-year mortgages.
Have they?
Yeah. So in Germany, they have a 100-year mortgage, which is why those properties stay in generations, because the family collectively buy it, and then they all live on it, and then they all start buying each other out. But it's a 100-year mortgage. So if you think you took $500,000 over 100 years, let's say, that's affordable.
Yeah.
And you get a decent big house. Whereas you said, we're like, because where I see it, census, is someone's paying $3,000 a month to live in a 3-bedroom house in the smallest part of Bristol with traffic everywhere. And I'm like, do you really, the quality of life, just to say I own a house doesn't make sense for me.
Yeah.
And so, we've had people I know that said, you know what, I want to own, that's the big thing that I want, but I'm prepared to move across the bridge, for example. So great, go for it. I think that's an intelligent move. Rather than like, oh, I must buy in Bristol and I'm living in the 1-bedroom thing and my quality of life sucks, but you know what, at least I own a property. I'm like, you got to take a bit of more of a step back and think, is that wise?
Well, and who's it for? Who are you doing that for?
Yeah,
you're doing it for everybody else.
Yeah,
to what it looks like. Yeah. Whereas actually, what you kind of do it for your family. Like if you move to a kind of lesser part of town, maybe.
Yeah.
But you've got a bigger garden that your kids can play in. Surely that's better.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the thing is now, as I got a little bit older and started looking beyond, say, Bristol and places like that, what you can buy for your money, and obviously with COVID happening, and now we do a lot of stuff online and travel and that, you can live pretty much. You could go and move to Scotland, live in a big castle. All right, it's going to be darker earlier and a bit colder, but the point is you could have a decent work-life balance and still do your job.
Yeah.
And I think that for me is probably the biggest thing that shifted over the last 3 or 4 years, where you go in, I get invested in property. I've done it 100%, but I think sometimes property is not the only investment that you can invest in.
Without question.
And you know, so there are other routes, and having a wealth manager go, well, you could, but the reality is, by the time you sell that house in 25 years' time, is that money going to be worth more with inflation and everything like that? So are you just exactly the same?
Yeah. Yeah, and quite often, so there's loads of charts on this, and because of quite a few of our clients, because they're generally wealthy, they're into property, or they've had some kind of interaction with property, and they get really obsessed with it, and they'll say, oh yeah, but property always increases, doesn't it? And actually, no, it doesn't always increase. And so you look at the differences in whether something increases is how often you're looking at the value of it, because your property, you don't get it valued every week. No, you get it valued when you buy it and when you want to sell it. Yeah. Quite often, and not really very regularly in between. So a lot of people will forget that kind of 2007, 2008, property prices fell, and that was that. But they never noticed it unless they had to sell at that time. Yeah. And yet they're so concerned about kind of the stock market and investing. But actually, if you look over the long term, they've got investment returns have massively outstripped property returns. But people kind of look back and they say, "Oh yeah, but property really increased in the 80s and 90s." It's not going to again, is it? Like if you're on 40 grand a year or whatever, what kind of mortgage can you get? And the property you want's 400 grand. Like, you can't afford it. Exactly. So how much more has it got to grow? Yeah, exactly. So I think and that's kind of where I'm at. It's like if you invest in other things and then you get payouts or whatever, then invest in property is a wise decision. Yeah. But it's not necessarily always going to be the smartest decision if that's your only investment route. Yeah. And I think that's kind of where I'm a great proponent of saying, well, why do you want to move house? Why do you want a bigger house? I want a better quality of life. And you want, well, then have you thought about moving 100 miles away? But we live in a world that 100 miles, 45 minutes, an hour maybe drive. Yeah, it can be. Yeah. It can be, but you could have a much better quality of life being holed up in a city just because you say I want to own somewhere. Because I should. Because I should, because everyone's telling me that's the best thing I should do. And that's where I work, but actually I only spend one day a week in the office. Yeah. So what difference does it make? And I think that's what's changed, that office mentality, because I don't have to be in the office as much as you. I think it's kind of freed people up a little bit. Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's quite difficult in our industry, and partly because of where we're at as a business with the whole kind of home working thing. So I generally work at home on a Monday, and then I'm in the office generally for the rest of the week. Right. And the big reason for that is that people need to learn. And I think that's something that you lose in our industry, is that when you've got young people, they thrive and kind of really benefit from the conversations that they overhear. Yeah. And that's what really benefited me when I was first starting out, was kind of listening to what was going on in the office, what was being talked about to clients. And if you sat at home, you don't hear any of that. No. So I'm kind of torn on the home working thing. I think it works really well for a lot of people. But when you're kind of starting out and kind of applying your trade and learning, you need to be around people. You need to hear the buzz of an office, or this is just in our industry, obviously. But no, I agree with you. I think it's a healthy balance. I mean, I've got like an agency, and ultimately that agency is full of people that are all online. They're working. We've gone fully remote. There is that desire for them to get together a bit, and we do that as well. But you do miss that over the shoulder conversational learning type stuff that you could just walk past and go, oh, change this, move this, do this. Oh, great, thanks. Whereas they might be stressing over that for an hour and you wouldn't know because you're not online at the same time. So I think for me, it's about finding, it works for certain industries and not so good for others. Definitely. So there's that, and there's a balance to be had. And there's always a balance, isn't there? There's always a balance, but I think you have to learn to adapt. You have to put tools and things in place that can do that. But, I think for me, what's happened is we're definitely more free than we used to be. Yeah. I went into Bristol the other day. I sound like I hate Bristol. I don't. But just trying to get into Bristol, it took me an hour and a half, which is a 30-minute journey. And I'm like going, I don't have the desire to have meetings. So when I have a meeting now, I do it North Bristol, because it's not so far for me to travel, and I don't have to get across town because it's a nightmare, and partly that's by design because they don't want us to be using our cars, but sadly that then impacts footfall and people go elsewhere. Yeah.
And so you'll start to see big companies moving out because they're not getting the footfall they once were. So it does have a bit of a knock-on effect.
And then it has a knock-on the shops that are local and the kind of little bakeries and whatever.
Because they're not selling sandwiches all the time because the workforce isn't there.
Yeah.
Because they're all at home.
So it does have a big impact, doesn't it? And I don't think people are that kind of forward-looking to realise. They just think, oh, actually, let's discourage people from coming in.
Yeah, so in terms of wealth then, and we mentioned property is obviously one. What other areas would you invest in? You know, I'm not saying you have to tell people, but you know, they're looking to it. What other options are there open for people that are looking to invest?
So you generally kind of categorize into kind of four main, main kind of investment areas, I guess. And so you've got cash, so you should always have a bit of cash.
Yep.
You've got fixed interest, so bonds, so basically kind of lending money to governments, companies, and they'll kind of repay generally kind of a rate of interest.
Yep.
And then you get the capital back at the end of it if it's kind of worked out. So they're kind of at the lower end kind of risk. You've then got property, obviously, which you've already talked about, and then you've got equities. So the way we would invest is buy the whole market, so globally diversified portfolio. You'll own thousands of companies, so you're not taking the risk of one company failing. So there's a phrase that diversification is the only free lunch in investing, and there's a lot of people who kind of have made a hell of a lot of money from buying kind of individual shares.
Yeah,
but quite often it can kind of come back and bite you,
and
you can lose everything. Whereas kind of the way we invest, we're never going to shoot the lights out. We're just a steady Eddie kind of approach. We'll give you kind of a reasonable return over the long term. Kind of we're working in collaboration with you to kind of meet your goals, and that might be 30, 40 years. So we can take a slow and steady approach. We're fairly boring, and happily boring.
Well, that's it, isn't it? Because people look at investment and they start to see the market going up and down in a short window, and they panic and they quit out, right?
Yeah, and that's the worst possible thing you can do.
Yeah.
And so you have to try and dampen that down a little bit. So you don't want those massive falls. So people want the massive spikes.
Yeah.
But they don't want the falls that go with it. And that's the whole kind of risk and reward trade-off. So,
but it's a point of longevity to stick it out and get a much better.
Yeah.
You know, don't look at investment over a case of 2 or 3 years. Look at over like 40, 50, 100 years, because there's cycles, right?
Yeah.
We've got enough data now for the last 100 years to see how things go.
Yeah.
You know, we know there's going to be a recession pretty much on time at some point, because that's just the way things are.
That's the way things are, of course it is, And the way kind of I look at investing is that markets always, if you look at it over the long term, markets always go up.
Yeah.
If you look at it over a short term, so if you look at it over a year, you could flip a coin and say whether it's going to go up or down. So do it for the long term.
Yeah.
Then chances on your side, because if you kind of take an average risk portfolio and look at it over 10 years, like for the portfolios that we run, they've never fallen.
There you go.
So
what do you, I mean, obviously there's that. And then what about, because it's funny enough, I didn't get onto that topic with Steve, so it's now on your desk.
Okay.
And I'm sure you've probably got an idea, but what do you think about crypto and that world? I mean, it's high risk, high reward. You know, I'm not saying you have to tell everybody invest in crypto or don't, but what would be your advice to those types of people that are thinking of crypto? Because obviously it's not regulated in the way that everything else is, for example.
Yeah.
Because I've seen people blow money on meme coins. They buy it low, it racks right up, and then someone pulls the rug and they've just lost hundreds of thousands of pounds. So what would you say in that world, someone who is crypto, just so maybe bring some sense to people? So
we don't advise on crypto.
Yep.
We don't at all. We don't see it as part of a kind of a part of our portfolio.
Yep.
But that's not to say there's not a place for it.
Yep.
And obviously people have made fortunes, as you've just alluded to.
Yeah.
What I would say with crypto, because it's so volatile, don't put everything into it that you can't afford to lose. So if you want to have a bit of a play with it, go ahead, enjoy it, but don't be sticking kind of, I don't know, 15 grand into it or whatever. If you can't afford to. It feels like
gambling to me.
Well, that's exactly what it is, because there's nobody knows what it's based. So it's not tied to anything. It's just what people are prepared to pay for it. And actually, like say you compare it to investments, there's a company behind it.
Yeah.
you know what profits they've got, you know kind of what situation they're in. Crypto, if you look at Ethereum, for example, what does it even mean? Like, what are you valuing that based on? And obviously people have done really well, as I've said. Like, so I've got a bit of a kind of a story of it, that a friend that I went to school with, he put, I think it was, he'd been playing around with it, and he started off with about £1,000, and he got to the point where he could buy a house.
Wow.
So he got to £290,000.
Wow.
He didn't sell. And then I think it was it 2021 where it absolutely fell through the floor.
Yeah. And
in fairness to him, he just went, it wasn't my money. Like, was never my money. It's just kind of what I'd hedged it, like what I'd bet it on. So he was fairly kind of philosophical about it. Whereas I would be like, I had 290 grand. What was I doing?
I had a friend that had Bitcoin on a laptop, and he binned the laptop. And then obviously it was in a tip, and then obviously things began to change, and he was like, and then we go, don't you want to like jump in a car and drive to that tip to find that laptop? And he was just like, it's gone. Now, he never told us how much it would have been worth now, but it was quite significant.
Oh, yeah.
And I look at it and I go, you know what? It is what it is, you know. And I think for me, it's a little bit like, as you said, it's a bit like the lottery, isn't it? At the end of the day, it's a bit like, you know, there are winners, there are losers, but if you look at it conservatively, the best way to build wealth is to build it sustainably over a period of time.
That's the key.
You know, and I think we're always looking for that quick fix, you know. I mean, in fact, actually just that compound interest, investing slowly, build it, commit to the long term. And as you said, it's best to invest young, and just being consistent. It's like that rabbit and the tortoise type thing.
Yeah.
The hare and the tortoise. It's like just being consistent by doing small actions over a sustained period of time is probably the safest way to build wealth and build environment. And I think even in the property game, we'll get a property, we'll flip it, and then we'll make 20 grand and we'll pull it out or whatever. It never really works out that way, you know. And I think for me, it's that having a steady, like you said, we're steady, but that's what you need, I think, in wealth building.
Well, especially when you're working with people throughout retirement, they don't want kind of wild swings in value. They want to know that their income's coming in every month, and they don't have to worry about it. Whereas if you fell by 75% because you're in blockchain or whatever, you're like, oh,
exactly. And then, like, for me, it's like I saw. It's just like, it creates that culture of people. So like I've seen a lot of people in that crypto space now where they're trying to come up with the next meme coin, and ultimately it's to get as much money as it, and you're going to pull the rug. That's the behavior.
Yeah.
You know, and ultimately if you do that, then it's bad on you as well as an individual, because you're just capitalizing on people's ignorance in a way.
And you're part of the problem.
Exactly.
Really, because there's something called greater fool theory, and when you kind of buy in individual shares or buy in kind of cryptocurrencies, there's got to be a greater fool than you who's going to buy it for a higher value.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of works quite well with cryptocurrencies, that you've got no idea what it's worth.
Yeah.
So, but somebody's got to be stupid enough to buy it for more than you bought it for you to make some money.
That's it. Yeah. Exactly. So, I mean, listen, I'm not against the whole crypto thing, but I think it's good to bring some perspective, like from yourself that's in that world, to turn around and say, look, if you are going to invest, make sure you can afford to lose it.
Yeah.
And I think that's wise to the people that are maybe considering that as the option. So what does the future hold then? Because obviously you've been working there 10 years, you've seen the business grow, and Steve and the team has got bigger and making more impact. What do you see the biggest shifts over the next 10 years then as a company?
As a company, so I think AI is going to have a big impact on how we move forward.
Okay.
And in terms of, so one of our biggest problems, but one of the biggest kind of headaches in a business is getting the right staff in place. Yeah. And getting them at the right time and at the right level. Yeah. Whereas I think AI has the potential to dramatically shift kind of how we hire, and at what level we hire them at, because really we're seeing kind of we at the beginning of the year we were like, oh yeah, we really need somebody in this position, but we've implemented a couple of AI tools and we're like, oh, actually, do we need somebody? And like that's just like note taking, like so transcription services. Yeah. And kind of it can generate kind of basic letters, and so that's kind of be a big shift for us. as a business, which is quite interesting. It's early stages, but
well, even in the sense of financial modelling.
Yeah.
Like you know, like something like ChatGPT, you can go, if you understand prompting, you can prompt a cash flow forecast, you can prompt stuff now which you couldn't do back in the day.
Yeah.
And get a fair enough reflection that's quite accurate and
it's reasonable,
you know, so it's definitely, I think these mundane tasks, as we call it, are more accessible. I was talking to a company the other day and they were saying that there is a big swell of finance now being invested into what they call is prompt engineers.
Okay, yeah.
So a prompt engineer is essentially someone that is not a coder, whatever, but they know how to get what they want out of the right prompts.
Right, yeah.
So the skill isn't in the actual execution. The skill is being able to prompt to get what you need is actually a skill in itself.
Yeah.
And, you know, and they were saying in a lot of companies now, they're like six figure jobs, you know, for a decent prompt engineer. And a lot of these people are starting, because, you know, code's starting to change now. AI can write code more accurate. You can find the bug quicker. And obviously there are platforms now that exist that are using AI, but they're almost built in with Lego when you're talking tech. So AI is definitely a world in which we can't ignore. I think it's another tool. It's not going to be the all.
See, that's the big thing for us. So I think there was a lot of fear mongering in our profession that it was, is it going to replace advisors? Is it going to replace paraplanners, admin? No, it's just going to make us more efficient and make us better.
Exactly.
In my opinion.
Well, no, I agree. But I think if you are going to invest speculatively and a little bit of money here and there, you'd probably use some tools and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But if I'm going to invest a decent amount of money and commit to the long game, I want to talk to a human.
Yeah, and you want to build a relationship. You
100%.
Want someone to be there at the end of the phone to say, I'm going through this.
Yeah.
What do you think? Can I just have a chat to you about it? Can I bounce some ideas off you?
There you go.
ChatGPT is not going to do that.
No,
or not at the moment.
Not yet.
Hopefully
no,
not.
No, I agree, and I think that was the thing I always said is that, you know, like if you are trying to get a loan off a bank and you go on their website and you try and do it, and it might give you a picture and then you might be able to accept it. If you're going to go for more money, you do want to talk to a human.
Yeah.
If you're going to make big financial decisions, you want to talk to someone. You want to outweigh the risks. You need to look someone in the white of the eyes and get decent advice.
Yeah.
And I think no matter what industry you're in, you're always going to need that.
Yeah.
You know? Like even in our world, you know, we've got a brand agency and there's some things you can do, but there's nothing like actually talking to humans and being around the humans and saying, well, this is the strategy for you. And we can use some AI stuff, but actually at the end of the day, this is how you engage with your audience. They need that encouragement. They need that help by a consultant, by someone that's willing to walk hard yards with them.
Yeah, without a doubt.
So how would someone reach you, get in touch with you? Are you easy enough to get hold of on LinkedIn or something like that?
So I'm on LinkedIn, so just Dean Poulson. The firm's Britannic Place Financial Management, so could find us either way. Visit our website, we're easily contactable, you can leave us a message. So it's we're fairly easy to get hold of. Easy to find a bit more about us and the team and how we work. It's all over. We put a lot of content out and we've got blog posts, etc. So it's great.
I mean, you know, for me, just to get the perspective of going into a company and working in that company over time to build something is great. And at the same time, you've got an investment ahead, and I'm sure that you're investing as well as doing what you're doing. So it's been really refreshing to hear that side of the journey, because I think people get caught up in purpose being always about entrepreneurship. It's not. It's about finding what you're good at and doubling down on it and feeling fulfilled and making an impact. And certainly hearing your story today, you seem to be doing that. So well done.
Yeah, thank you. It's just being in the right place, isn't it? And finding where you fit.
Yeah. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Cool. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to the Purpose People podcast. How you can help us is to like and subscribe our YouTube channel. You can also subscribe to our podcasts on Apple, Spotify, Google and Amazon. That helps us get our message out there to help people go after their dreams, double down on it and be successful in life on their terms.